Good afternoon. On behalf of Blanco, I'm pleased to present a discussion with young retailers and vendors from across Canada who will share their views on the needs, drives of the next generation in the home improvement industry. With voices from all levels of industry, dealer, vendor, and corporate retail, this group of young leaders will challenge your thinking on where the industry is going in the 21st century. The panel will be moderated by Sherry Amos, Education and Communication Specialist at Home Hardware Stores. Like you, Ms. Amos enjoys good conversation with interesting tales. With more than 14 years in the home improvement industry as a communication and training specialist for home hardware, she has worked with a variety of initiatives from the launch of e-commerce, store-level communications and training programs to coordinator of Home's Young Leaders Group. Like our panel of young leaders, she understands the importance of looking ahead to the future of our industry. Please join me in welcoming Sherry Amos and the Young Leaders panel.
So good afternoon, everyone. Before we begin and before I actually introduce the panelists, I have a question for you. How many in this room actually thought they would work in the home improvement industry? So when you were really little, you actually thought that this would be something that you would do? Now I'm going to ask the rest of the room. How many of you thought you'd actually be someplace else, someplace very different from where you find yourselves today? And you know what's interesting about that is that when you ask the young leaders, we have a variety of answers to that question. But how many of you would say it was the best decision to stay and have your career in this industry, in the home improvement industry? Absolutely, and so our young leaders agree today. And first, I'd like to introduce Kim Eitzma. Kim is a dealer owner, home hardware dealer owner in Alliston, Ontario. She owns her store with her mother, and she's been in the industry actually since she's been 10. And so even though Kim told me she wasn't a dreamer, she did say that she always knew that she would work in the store. And in 2013, she was awarded by the NRHA of Canada the Young Retailer of the Year Award. Sitting next to Kim, we do have Lee Harney of Rona, and so Lee is actually taking the place of Marc-Andre Dignard, who was to be with us today, and unfortunately he has pneumonia. And so his doctor told him he couldn't fly, and his wife told him he couldn't drive. So Lee Harney is taking his place. So Lee started his career about 20 years ago, and he was a shipper for part-time shipper at Lansing, and he moved with Lansing to Rona in 2001, where he's held a variety of positions. He's done frontline as well as management. He worked in operations. He's also done dealer development. And currently, he is the director of dealer support for Rona. And when I asked Lee if he intended to be in this industry, he said, you know what, I always knew I'd be in business, but I wasn't sure where. So welcome, Lee. And next to Lee, we have Joel Siebert. Now, Joel is from Calgary, Alberta, and he's the general manager of Mountain View Building Materials. Mountain View sounds beautiful, doesn't it? And he is actually a third-generation lumberman. And interestingly enough, though his bio says that he was been born and raised in this industry, he actually never thought he would end up here. And so his very first job, his dad gave him his very first job with a contractor of his. And so he laid sod. Not for very long, because after that he decided he was going to open up his own landscaping business. And from there, he spent a number of years running his own operation. And 4 years ago, he decided to join his family business and come back and actually run the ship. So welcome, Joel. And next to Joel, we have Eric Palmer. And Eric is our vendor on the panel. He works for Geldwin Windows. He's 7 years into his career, and he has spent a lot of time in a variety of different positions. And so quite recently, he became the Canadian Sales Operation Manager, and he is a business school's honor grad. And when I asked him if what he thought in terms of would he end up in this industry, and he said, you know what, I always knew I would be in business. I always dreamt of being in business, and I always dreamt of carrying a briefcase to work. And so he just never thought it was in this industry. So I'd like to welcome our young leader panelists for today. And we'll move into the first question. So considering the generation before you, and so whether that be your colleagues or your parents, what or how are you doing business differently? So Lee, let's start with you.
Okay.
Thank you. You know, in our organization, we recognized this probably 5 or 7 years ago that the do-it-for-me business was going to be a big part of the business going forward. So we really focused in this area, particularly in the last 5 years with our teams and with our installer partners to focus on install programs within our stores. And I see this being probably one of our greatest opportunities with the boomers in particular. With their disposable income and retirement on the horizon, the last thing most boomers would want to do is do it themselves. So I see that probably as our single biggest opportunity as a company and an industry going forward.
Okay. What about you, Kim?
So we've also been focusing on home installs through our store, but I think one of our best things that we've done is brought in so many new product lines. Yes, we're a lumber store at heart, but we've brought in, we were talking about that last night, we've brought in socks, we've brought in artwork, we've just expanded a lot of our existing lines to help with margins. We've doubled a lot of our departments like flooring and plumbing where there are more margins there, and I think we also carry a lot more inventory than my parents used to. We have a lot more on hand because people expect that, you know, the demands of our consumers are a lot higher than what they ever used to be, so heaven forbid you're out of something.
Yeah. What about you, Joel? I mean, you come from a similar situation as Kim, you know, you're generational. How are you doing it differently?
Well, I think how I'm doing things differently than the generations past is we're in a real adaptive area where we have to adapt to our generation and sell to them as well as still, you know, for lack of a better word, old school still have that personal touch with a lot of the boomers and to be able to help them the way that they're used to being helped while adapting to what's coming down the pipelines in the future with how we're supposed to sell to newer generations. So I guess we're still selling a lot of the same products and we're still selling a lot of the same, and we're still selling them a lot of the times the same way, but it's just now we're trying to sell them to different people and we're just trying to adapt to that, the different clientele, the new generations.
Right. So what about you, Eric?
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello. I think I'll answer the question a little bit different since I come from the vendor side, but I think one of the things for all of us in this generation and potentially the older generation is we're communicating more and at a faster pace. We were just talking about it at the break earlier. Even though we go to a show or go to a conference, we're constantly communicating with the people back in our stores or the people back in our businesses, and you can never turn it off anymore. You're always dialed in. People expect you to respond. Last night, after dinner, I'm not going to whine here because my boss is in the crowd, but I was expected to go back and do reports in my hotel room and communicate with people and email them and get that interaction and get that done before you wake up the next morning, you get that stuff in. So I think it's just a change, and it's not just for our generation, but it's for everybody that we're constantly communicating and constantly doing business.
So, and when you talk about constant communication, do you think that's a positive or a negative? And how do you find the balance?
I think it is both.
Yeah.
It's positive because we're all driving forward with less resources, and that's a mandate for a lot of people. Is we have to communicate and do business with less. But you do need to figure out how to manage it. You do need to unplug at some point, turn that phone off, and spend time with family, friends, all those types of things, or else we all get burnt out. All those road warriors out there who are constantly doing it. You just need to take some time for yourself as well.
I thought it was nice this morning that Paul Beeston touched on that, the importance of a good work-life balance. Often, I mean, we're never unplugged, we're available all the time. You know, our customers, contractors are contacting us of all hours of the day, and you're expected to respond. So for him, at 69 years young, to drive that home for the rest of us to remember the importance of that work-life balance, I thought was kind of cool this morning.
Good. And so someone touched on the next generation. So when you're looking at the millennials and the Gen Ys, and you see them entering into your businesses, both as employees, and you're also, soon they will be customers as well. How are you adjusting your management style, or how are you adjusting how you do business with them directly? Is that something that you're taking into consideration? And how?
Yeah, it's a reality, obviously, going forward, and I think we're really hitting a crossroads here where we are going to be losing a lot of talent and knowledge in the boomers, and as the millennials come in, it's a very different dynamic, and they're looking for more flexibility. They're certainly looking for that work-life balance versus just the income side of things. And I heard a great statement that employers and companies are going to have to adapt to the millennials will have to adapt to their companies as they come in, but it's actually the opposite. I think our companies are going to have to adapt to the millennials and that style. So it's going to be a big challenge, and I think that work-life balance and the flexibility is certainly coming into play.
I thought it was interesting last night, or yesterday actually, when Vicki Hagel was talking about it from Castle, and she talked about all the different colors of hair that she has and the variety of ages that she has, and how it obviously to me seemed like they were very well accepted in her place of business, and they actually worked in harmony with each other, and I thought that was really interesting. So rather than adjusting them, adjusting her business. So what about you, Joel? How are you managing it?
Well, it's not so much managing it. This is the future. This is what everybody's going to have to dealing with. And the hardest thing I find with the Generation Y and the younger labor force coming in is so many of them don't know what they want. They don't realize the value in having a sustainable career. Like, this is just every time they come to work, it's just a job that they're coming to. And I think my biggest objective as an employer is to show them how to have fun, how important it is to be accountable and show up for your team and be at work, and the fun that you can have at your job. And hopefully they look at it and stick around for 5 or 10 years and realize that they can make this a career before they walk out the door, go 2 or 3 jobs down the road and go, oh damn, that was a really great place to work. Maybe I should have put in a little more effort there and not looked at it just as a stepping stone.
So what sort of things are you doing to help them realize that?
Well, we definitely involve, well, management, I guess, goes and spends more time with them, learns more about what it is that drives them, because really, it's so different. Most of them don't have houses right now. They're not parents. Yep. They're not driven by the almighty dollar. They're looking for flex time. They're looking for a lifestyle. And I think the more you appeal to that need of a lifestyle, I think the better success that you're having with employee retainment.
Absolutely, makes sense. So I have another question, and I think this is interesting given your variety of backgrounds and even on the tail end of what we were talking about in terms of making retail a career. So, and our industry. So when you look at our industry, is it necessary to have a formal education to be successful? And why or why not? I think we'll start with you, Eric.
I think so.
I'm going to say the answer is twofold, because I'm a younger generation, so I'm not going to be committed to one answer. And just one thing on the generation thing, everyone is still a human being at heart, and if you sit down and treat them with respect, that's the best thing, because I'm sure all your parents sat in a room and talked about how your generation was so different, so we're going to do it every single generation down the road, so just treat everyone with respect and it's going to work out for you. Education, I think I graduated with a business degree. It helps open doors initially for the first 5 years. Having that on your resume is very, very important. After that experience, and the person themselves is the most important. And if they're trainable and teachable, then that's really what's important, not that degree that hangs on the wall for the rest of your working career.
Someone else? Joel?
Yeah, I have to agree. There's certain positions within a company that do require post-secondary education, but if you're in sales, you're born to sell. I mean, it's something that you have in you. I don't think it can be taught. Product knowledge can be, but that contact that a salesperson has with their clientele base is something that you're born with. So yes, you do need it in some aspects, but in other aspects, I don't think you do.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's a real balance to this in our industry, and if I look to my colleagues in our organization, some of the best and brightest have really worked their way through the ranks over the years. But there is a point where I think education comes into play and an ongoing development, and certainly in Rona we encourage that internally, but also externally through tuition subsidies and that type of thing, to make sure our managers in particular are developing themselves in key areas where they think they need to gain that experience and knowledge.
Yeah, interesting about the ongoing development, and I know a lot of our dealers work very hard to take a look at their current employees and say, okay, they've come in with a certain skill set, but how do I extend that, and then that goes into showing them how this could become a career too, right? Investing in them. What about you, Kim? What do you think?
I agree with the other gentleman up here with me. I think there's so much value in the post-secondary education. I've got a university degree from Lakehead in business. But has that really been a life changer for me? on the store line. I don't think it has. Yes, it's helped me grow as a person, and you know, you learn so many life skills, especially up in Thunder Bay. But I think that we'll leave that for later. I really wish there was more training available. Like, I wish there was a college program maybe that you could get a degree in retail sales or, you know, lumber retail, that sort of thing. I think that would be much more beneficial if I had to do it all over again. I found what I learned was very corporate based and not so much hands-on, which is where I find myself often.
Yeah, the NRHA recently launched a program, I think it's probably 2 years young, about retail management, and it's taking place in the U.S. and we've looked at it. So there is a bit of a gap in the industry, I would say, for very specific development for what we do. Just a show of hands, very interested just to see the audience. How many of you have post-secondary education? And how many of you came through the ranks? I know our CEO did. Awesome, thank you. All right, so when you look at the skills that are necessary for success, what would you say they are? If you had to break it down to 3 simple things, what would you say contributes the most to success?
I don't know about 3, but definitely the number 1 would be drive.
Yeah.
Just don't quit.
Tenacity, yeah.
Go for it. And I just wanted to add one more thing to the education thing before that. I think the associations that we're all a part of play a huge role in educating, and I thought it was really interesting when you said, do you need education, or what was that? I can't remember the exact wording on it.
Do you need formal education or?
Formal education, and we all interpreted it as post-secondary when I'm part of an association out west, the WRLA, and they run a hell of a program. It's 2 weeks, and they cover everything from plumbing and electrical estimating, like right through to retail and inventory management. So, I mean, I think that's something that the associations can jump on top of, and then, promoting through career fairs or anything else, or to your younger generation, that maybe you don't need to get 20 grand, 50 grand in debt. If you want a career here, we'll pay for you to go after it and do stuff like that.
I think that comes down to a lot of the millennials not thinking of retail as a career, which I think would be nice if we could help convey that to them. There's a lot of great millennials out there that would excel at this if they had the right guidance and right steps in place to be able to take.
Yeah. What about you, Eric? Success?
To be successful, I think drive would be probably my number 1, and then I think you have to be able to adapt. It's a fast-paced, changing business environment, and what's asked upon you changes constantly. At least on our side of the business, I believe even in a retail setting at the independent dealers, you may be doing a job one day, but then you're going to have to fill in for someone else the next day. So there's a lot of structure built out there, but you need to be able to change and wear different hats as that comes up.
Be flexible. Absolutely, absolutely. So drive, hard work. Okay, let's talk about social media.
It's very important.
And it's not going away. So how is it affecting your business today? And where do you think it's moving in the future?
Well, we were just before this started here having a really interesting talk at our table about the effects of social media, and the one thing that really keyed in this week with me, and I mentioned it back at the table there, was yesterday. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he was talking about the new 130,000 square foot Canadian Tire store going in. And 10, 15 years ago, when we were designing layouts of our stores, or our website, sorry, we were trying to mimic that. We were trying to mimic the stores on our website. But now when he talked about that store, that Canadian Tire store, they're talking about walking into a room and that room mimicking, or the store mimicking how you navigate through a website. So you walk in, you see that faucet, and you go, oh, that looks awesome. And then you look at that faucet, and then you see the SKU, and then you see the SKU for the part that connects it to the counter, and then you trace it all the way down. And with that's just a perfect example of websites and gearing sales towards the millennials. Is we're all used to looking online and finding stuff really easily. So they're designing stores for you to go in and find stuff with the same ease. So, I mean, websites, social media, that kind of stuff is important. And the first person to find the way to combine everything all in one with your personal touch of a salesperson combined with your social media, write a book and let us all buy it.
I think it's two-part. I mean, social media can be, in terms of Facebook and Twitter, it can be our best friend or it can be our worst nightmare, especially if it's a customer issue or complaint or opportunity. So I think we need to be well aware of what's happening out there, whether it's a corporate company or an independent. I think you got to be aware of what's being said online about your store, because it may be surprising when you Google your own name. In terms of websites and in the internet, obviously we've seen a lot over the last couple days of how things are growing exponentially, and it's going to continue. But we have a bit of an advantage versus other retailers in that you need to still touch and feel certain products, and it's very much a project-oriented retail environment. So I think we need to use that to our advantage. We've got to stop the showrooming effect. Customers are still coming in, they're touching and feeling. We got to stop them right then and there and make sure that we're offering the right level of service and capturing that customer and not allowing it to go to our competitors or Amazon or wherever else it may be.
I think that's an interesting question, and about showrooming. Kim, are you seeing that happen in your store? Like, are you like the ones that are directly in retail, are you actually seeing that take place?
To some extent. I don't think to the full extent that it could be taken. I don't know about a lot of you, but I've been overwhelmed the past yesterday and today about all the omni-channel talk and how we have to be everywhere all the time. And a lot of you have 20 years on me, so I can only imagine how you guys are feeling. I think it's so important that we as independents I think it's so important that we as independents can stick together. I mean, we don't have $59 million in marketing dollars to put towards e-commerce and a lot of this other stuff. So I think it's so important that we continue with the e-commerce, and we have to be there. Otherwise, yeah.
I think too, you definitely have to be in social media. I think all the presentations have proven that. I think you need to define your problem before you get into social media. Us as a company, we met with our marketing agency. I was in the marketing group previously, and they said, you have to do this. You have to be on Twitter, Facebook, all these things. And at the end of that meeting, I said, okay, you need to tell me when you sell our first product through social media. And for 6 months in a weekly meeting, I asked, have you sold a product yet? And 6 months later, they said, hey, we sold an interior door for $39. That is great, but there was no return for us because we didn't properly define what our problem was. So I think if you all take a step back and all of this information, just say, what do we need to do with this? Or what is our problem? What do we want to do? Do we want to have a better profit loss statement at the end of the day? If you want to make more profit and you can figure out what that problem is and how social media is going to help you make more profit, then you can start to jump into it, because it's a massive world out there, and if the presentation about what it actually is confusing, then what about actually using it? It's overwhelming to me, at least. So.
Do you have something to add?
Just the interesting stat that I heard yesterday was 80% of consumers go online and they're looking for information and sort of predetermining their needs, and that poses probably our largest challenge when the customer gets in store. We have to make sure our teams are as educated, if not more, for that customer, because they're coming in a lot of cases more aware of what they're looking for than our staff are able to offer. So I see that as a huge opportunity for our industry and our stores to capitalize on.
And how do you do that? So when I look at our product selection, we have 60,000 SKUs. And you have a sales associate who, depending on their role in the store, may only be part-time, may only be there for the summer. How do you get them up to speed?
Again, it's our biggest challenge, I think, for everybody. It's a tough one to answer, but we've got to utilize our resources. And if I look to the boomers, we're about to lose an awful lot of knowledge, and we need to capture that extremely fast and try and develop our teams in a quick manner, but make sure they're confident. And it's probably, I would say, our single biggest challenge as an industry moving forward over the next 5 to 10 years.
Thank you. So, when we talk about trends, let's take a look at trends over the next year. If you had to predict what the trends would be in your industry, and you're all approaching it from a different angle, what would you say they would be? Joel?
Well, I think the obvious trend of the weekend was being more aware of our role in our company's role and how we can use social media and online sales to our advantage. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if I don't know if any of us are going to be able to adapt within a year that fast, but there's definitely going to be more talks and more planning gearing towards dealing with that in the future for sure.
What about products? What are customers looking for?
Well, I think customers are looking for product innovation, and I hope from the manufacturing side, we're in a flat market, so this pie is only so big, so there's a lot of manufacturers, and there's a lot of retailers, and there seems to be more manufacturers and more retailers. So I think product innovation is going to be critical if you want to maintain your piece of pie or make your piece of pie larger of the whole. And secondly, I think environmental issues and the focus on the environment, a lot of us are having to change our products because of building codes or other reasons. So I think you'll see innovation driven through that, and then also manufacturing side wanting to drive product innovation.
I think consumers also want products that have been evaluated by their peers. I mean, that's how they really want, and that's what they don't put their trust in me, although some days they do, but a lot of times they're going to put their trust in their peers and people, their neighbors and their friends and their family that they respect and have that existing relationship with. So I think products with good reviews, sort of how Greg Hicks touched on it yesterday, the tested in Canada, I think that's a great idea. So.
Excellent. So as far as taking it even broader, so when you look at the next 5 years for your particular area of business, so whether you're a vendor, whether you're a store owner, whether you're working in the corporate part of the industry, what do you think we need to be doing?
I'll take this one.
Okay. Eric.
Well, I think one of the things, and I think it's struck me, I've traveled to some buying shows before and an event like this, I think there's different banners, and we sit across from our competitors on the manufacturing side, but if we can share some best business practices as much as possible without giving away all of our trade secrets that we have, it helps. Conferences like this with speakers where we all can learn and be educated, then we can start to drive innovation, new products, and the way to develop those products, or in the retailer sense, ways to retail. I mean, it's not a secret everyone can buy books and go and figure this stuff out, but if you're willing to make the trip here and sit here and be educated and allow a conference like this to educate you, it's very, very helpful. And I think it's important too that we can drive this particular industry forward. So the market's flat, the pie's the same size, but if we can band together and become stronger over the next 5 years, we can make our pie bigger, which means we all benefit from that.
Joel?
I think over the next 5 years with, in the retail side of things, at least where I'm from, with the loss of more and more baby boomers and more knowledge leaving the industry, I think it's going to be forcing a lot of the stores to become more and more niche. So knowing more about a fewer amount of products and being experts on that than knowing a little bit about of a lot. And I think that's where it's going in our neck of the woods.
I would agree totally with that, and I think, you know, in terms of the internet and where things are going, it's really a crystal ball, and if we could go back 5 years, we've come so far, and it's anybody's guess, but we know that's absolutely going to move forward in a very fast area. But I would go back to the people side as well. I see that as probably our biggest threat right now in the next 5 to 10 years, and we need to capitalize on that very quickly and try to keep some millennials on board and show them that there is a future in our industry and in retailing, and it's not just being a cashier or a shipper. We got to, you know, hook them up on a mentoring program and the ongoing development and training as well.
Okay. I think one of the other challenges that I see in our store is that our consumers are much more educated than they used to be. And with a lot of the older staff leaving and the millennials in, I find that a lot of them know a lot more of some of the staff, so to train them is so important. I find sometimes they're also miseducated, so to, you know, sort of convey that to them in a nice manner is also a challenge. But
How do you do that?
so this is how I would do it if this was my project.
Right. Excellent. So let's get a little personal here and ask the question: if you had to do something over in your career, you know, knowing that you're so many years into it and you have so many years ahead of you, if there was one thing that you could redo, or if you could go back in time and change, what would it be? I'm going to give this one to Eric.
Nothing.
Ah!
That's an interesting question. Well, since we're talking about millennials and people like that, I think when you first get a position, this could be some insight, and you've graduated from business school and they teach you how to run the company and they forget to teach you how to work the photocopier. And then once you learn how to work the photocopier, you walk into your boss's office and say, "Can I have a raise now? Because I learned how to work the photocopier." is that maybe just walking a little bit slower, not running into business and thinking that you do run the company, but taking time and learning from your mentors. There's people there who dedicate the time if you listen to them, and you don't think you know everything because you obviously don't know everything at that point. So I'd say just ease into it a little bit more.
Interesting. What about you, Kim?
I probably would have chosen to not go to secondary education. I think if I had to do it all over again, I would have kept my feet in the store as opposed to leaving town for 4 years. That definitely would be a decision I would redo.
Yeah, interesting. What about you, Joel?
I don't know if there really would be anything, because if you look back on where we've all come and gone, I think you draw from each individual experience in your past, and that helps you be successful with what you're doing today. So, I mean, I guess if there's one thing I could say, it would maybe have been getting involved a little bit younger, but then I wouldn't have had all the experiences that I could draw from in the past to help with what we do today. I don't know. That's a really tough question.
No regrets.
No.
Yeah. What would you, Lee?
It is a tough question, but I think for me it would have probably been accelerating myself a little quicker in the early days, and I think it's a key learning for some of our teams out there now. We got to look for those diamonds in the rough, and wherever I was sort of promoted over the years, it took somebody else to believe in me,
Right.
versus me pushing myself maybe into that next position. So I think it's really important for us to look to our frontline teams. That's really where it's got to start now, and really encourage them to move forward. And it's certainly a future for them in our industry.
Right, which helps solve the problem of succession in the industry too, right? Interesting. Okay. And so as far as your leadership style, because you're all leaders, what would you say it is? Like if you had to define your leadership style, how do you prefer to lead your teams?
I define that as I'm still learning and trying to get better at leadership. I think it's a harder thing as a younger person in business, and especially when you look as young as I do, which I am young, but look very young, and you're having to sit in boardrooms and ask people who potentially are a little bit older than you to do something, right? I find that difficult. So, but I think probably the best thing is some of the things that were talked about by earlier presenters is just trust people and treat them with respect. It honestly, whether they're a millennial or an older generation person, if you can sit down and you trust each other, then you're going to get the best work out of the people who work for you and around you.
I spend 3/4 of my day on the sales floor most days, working alongside the staff, teaching them that it is so important to have fun. You know, I've been in the business for quite a while, so just teaching them that it's so important to love what you do and to put your heart and soul into it. And, you know, number one is customer service, and they can see myself, you know, doing that well, and then, you know, always sort of leading by example, which I know many of us do here. And, you know, I started emptying the garbages. I still do it when I get to work on Saturday mornings, and I think that's so important for them to see that, and then for them to see that, you know, I'm still having fun doing it, and that there is a career for them in this job if they so choose.
Yeah, I guess just lead by example.
Yeah.
Work with them, teach them.
Yeah.
But I guess, and that's with the younger generation. But we were talking last night when I went over there. It was when I started working for the family business there. It was not given. Like I did come in and start working in the front, but it was there to learn and more or less teach my old man how to use the computers properly. But then when I wasn't there, I was in the yard building orders, or I was on the delivery truck. Like I was the everything guy, learning from everybody that had been there before. And I made damn sure to let everybody know that I wasn't coming in there to tell them how to do their job. I needed them to tell me how to do mine, and how I needed to work, and how I needed to find my position within the company that already been there. And it wasn't a come in and take over. So I guess learn from your elders and pass that down, be the middleman and pass it down to the next generation.
For me, yeah, it's definitely respect, a high level of respect for our teams, but leading by example. And what I mean by that is, you know, if you've worked your way through a store in the ranks, it's easy to tell somebody what needs to be done because you've lived that life. You can give them that clear leadership. And if you haven't had that, it's much more difficult. So we talked about it at our table earlier that Martin mentioned, you know, as a store manager, if you're not leading by example and you're telling your teams to clean, but you're kicking stuff under the racking, that's pretty damaging. So I think it's certainly leading by example.
And so when you go to hire, are you looking? So a position opens up within your team. Do you look to your team initially? Do you look outside of your team, or do you look at both? And why?
We usually look at both. I find it is always best to promote from within. I know Home Hardware corporately does that amazingly. Yeah, but there's not, I mean, everyone's got their own strengths and skill sets, so I find that we often end up hiring outside the company with no hard feelings, but yeah, mostly outside the company.
And how does your team feel about that?
We've only had it twice where someone from internally wanted to move up in the ranks, and we just explained to them that they couldn't devote enough hours and they didn't have the right skill set to be able to do the job, so that's why we had to hire this person instead.
Yeah. Okay, good. What about you, Joel? How are you hiring?
We have to look everywhere with the skilled labor force constantly
Right,
shrinking.
you have a different situation.
And
Yeah.
especially where we're from, we're up against, big energy corporations that offer high school kids 65 grand a year right out the door when they graduate to go and live in a camp in northern Alberta. I mean, it's really, really tough to find 2 feet and a heartbeat to come in your door. So most of the time hiring from within is not an option because there just isn't enough within to do what we're doing already. And to explore everything or to get people to come and work for you by exploring other options or posting ads elsewhere, most of the time we run into, well, why are you here? Like, why aren't you currently working? This city has help wanted ads everywhere. So why are you looking still, sort of deal? What's the reason? I'm trying to find this out.
Why is it my lucky day?
Yeah, that's right. Why are you here?
And so we're coming to the close of it. So if you had to give some advice to someone entering into our industry, what would you tell them?
I would say it's an awesome industry, and make sure you go to the bar as often as possible and listen to the stories of the people who have lived in this industry, because you won't want to leave at that point. And we will institute the broomball game again at the back of the hotel for WRLA this year, because I love that story. We just don't do it anymore, so somehow we're going to play broomball
Okay, we
at
have to.
midnight.
What's the story?
Well, both Joel and I are part of the Next Gen group, which is part of WRLA, so there's some young leaders, and we're kind of starting a group with Gary Hamilton and his team, coming together and figuring out how we can try to attract and retain young people in the industry. And both of us in different provinces heard about this story at one of our Next Gen events from different people that they used to play broomball at midnight on the last day of the show behind a hotel. And I would like to do that. We are going to bring it back this year.
Bring it back.
It was after everybody was not allowed back into the hospitality suites, and it was below -40, and everyone was just running around, and it got violent, it got chippy, and then everybody was having breakfast the next morning, and so I mean that's the kind of the common.
But it's about telling the stories, absolutely. Yeah.
They'll have to work the booth the next day.
What about you, Lee?
Well, I think it's really important for us to work with the millennials, because a lot of them aren't sure what they want to do. They're in school or they're going through school. It's on us to make sure that we encourage them that there is a future in our industry. It's a great industry. It's a big one, but it's also very small. It's tight knit, and there can be a great future. And again, just look around the room at who didn't think they were going to be in this industry when you started. So I think we got to be mindful of that and make sure that we're looking again for those diamonds in the rough that we can really work with and develop for the future.
Yep. Thank you. Kim? The question was, what advice would you give to someone entering into the industry?
Sorry, the broomball story kind of got in the way there. I
we
totally
digressed.
apologize. I get distracted
next
easy.
generation.
Millennial generation, what's happening? Shiny blue bike.
Bright and shiny.
Clearly it comes down to doing what you love, and I think if you can see that in somebody else, or if you can demonstrate that to somebody else coming into this business, that it's so amazing to go to a job that you want to go to every single day. That's huge. I mean, you want them to pursue their hopes and dreams in achieving what they want to accomplish, for the good of the world and for, helping people. And, yeah.
So, doing what you love, work hard, play a little broomball every now and again. I think there's a good point, Lee, in identifying those diamonds in the rough, because as we started off this conversation, the majority of us didn't know we wanted to end up here, and look at how great it is that we are actually here. So I want to thank our panelists today for sharing your stories, having the conversations. I wish you all the best in your businesses when you head back home. And I believe we're looking for Bev.
Big round of applause, and thank you so much.